The following program is a podcast1.com production.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
I dreaming of a white Christmas day.
Good morning and welcome to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, CEO of Viollis Group International and host of the podcast, The Security Brief, sitting in for my good friend, the one and only Laura Ingraham. First and foremost, before we get going, I want to wish everyone, on behalf of everyone here at the Laura Ingraham Show, a blessed holiday season. And now, with 2 days and counting, Christmas away, we've got an awful lot to share today, a lot to discuss, and most importantly, everybody, an awful lot to celebrate. Regardless of what's happened in 2017, there's one thing for sure. We're embarking upon one of the most blessed and sacred holidays that we share in this world, and it's important, it's imperative, it's incumbent upon all of us to take some time, and we're going to today, thanks to Laura's show, to celebrate that. Remember, you can always hit Laura up at on Twitter at Ingraham Angle, and you can always hit me up on Instagram and Facebook at Paul Viollis. We've got a great show today. I'm going to give you the lineup here in a second. I'm going to break this down a little bit for you so you know what we've got ahead of us. And then we're going to get into some breaking news stories this first half hour. Later on this in the first hour, we're going to have an attorney by the name of David Mittleman. He's going to be joining us to talk about what's happening in Michigan right now regarding the opioid crisis in the United States and the move to sue drug companies with respect to their causal relation to the opioid crisis. A little peek under the tent on this one. Obviously, we're going to get into this in a little bit. But what it does now is it compares as a direct comparison to the tobacco crisis in the 90s. And when David comes on, we're going to drill down on that. Now, remember, I need you guys to call in today because we have got a lot of stuff I want to hear from you on, an awful lot. One of the greatest parts about Laura's show. You can get us at 855-40-LAURA or 855-405-2872. Again, 855-405-2872. Shortly after that, we're going to be talking about the tax bill, but not about the tax bill. I know everybody's had a lot about that. But more so, we've got one of the country's leading economists, Tonelson, who's going to join us to talk about its effect on the economy. It's a fascinating subject, and I know you're going to get a lot out of that. Later on in the second hour, we're going to have Ambassador Dennis Ross, who's going to come on, and we're going to talk about the situation that happened yesterday and the vote of the UN against the United States and the United States' position in supporting the great state of Israel with respect to Jerusalem being its capital, and our position, and good for President Trump on this, and our position to finally step up and do the right thing. And someone who I am a huge fan of, and if you're not, we weren't yesterday, you are today, and that's Ambassador Nikki Haley. We're going to talk quite a bit about that in the last hour. We're going to be getting into a little bit about the holiday season. I mean, we're about to embark upon the busiest travel time of the year. Think about 109 million Americans are going to be traveling, and that's just a ton of people. I am so glad I'm going to be home sitting in the backyard on that one. And we've got AAA Director of PR, Jeanette Castellano. She's going to join us on that. And last but not least, our guest today, and of course, sprinkling in all the calls that you guys are going to have, which I can't wait to hear from you. But we're going to have Wendy Patrick, who's a career trial lawyer, but she's going to come in and talk about the things of how to understand people and predict their behavior. Basically, you know, the things that happen at the dinner table and the politics over the dinner table at Christmas time. I can't wait for that one. Now, personally, you know, I'm Greek and my wife's Sicilian, so you can imagine that is an extremely loud table and one that we always have a good time at. And I'm sure that you will definitely relate to that. So we got a great show ahead of you. And before we hit into our first break, I just want to touch on a couple of things. We're going to come back after the break and we'll drill down on them. But the thing that I find going on in the news today, and you heard some of the things we're going to cover, that is sticking in my throat. And for those of you that I have been fortunate enough that you've tuned in before, and I'm glad you're back today, you know how I feel, and for those of you that haven't, you will shortly, about my position on kneeling and the NFL's kneeling around the national anthem. I'm not going to pull any punches, which I never do and never will. And the position now has gotten Papa John's CEO to step down or to be removed as CEO because of his position on kneeling, because of his position against the NFL with respect to their position on not doing anything about it. Good for him. And I'll give you my place on that, and I'd love to hear your calls and your thoughts on that. Again, 855-405-2872. My position is as follows. Freedom's incredibly fragile, ladies and gentlemen. It requires protecting. It requires safeguarding. The blanket of freedom that we are clothed with every single day is precious to us, oftentimes taken for granted because we walk the streets, we go shopping when we want, we go to a movie when we want, we go out to eat when we want, we speak the language we want. All of this because of the great, and I emphasize great, men and women that have and continue to serve our country in our military that allow us this. Now, great, the counter argument is that they fight to give us that freedom of speech, and I get that, and this isn't about freedom of speech because it would take 4 hours to hit that one. But my point is, no one has the right to disrespect our flag. Our flag, ladies and gentlemen, is used to drape the coffins of our heroes. Our flag is used to fly above us and be a symbol of the greatness of this country and everybody that's a part of the greatness of this country. And kneeling to make a political statement, and granted, there are injustices, and we all know that, but kneeling before the national anthem, during the national anthem, while you've got members of our armed forces standing in front of them, holding this great American flag, you know what? Not a chance. When it first happened, I said on my podcast, again, the Security Brief, you can always hit me at viollis.com and listen to the show, or it's on every possible podcast channel. My position on this, and again, I'll circle around this later, but, good for the CEO or former CEO, John Schnatter of Papa John's. Good for him. Because he stood up, he did the right thing. He said what he needed to say. It's unfortunate that we're looking at that. But I want to hear your comments when we come back after this break. We're going to take a break in a couple minutes. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Please give us a call at 855-405-2872 because we're going to be teeing that up as a first piece of conversation. The second thing that we've been seeing a lot ad nauseum, but now we see this whole Weinstein thing coming in the place of, and I don't want to talk about Weinstein. So if you're about to back in the chair, I don't want to talk about him. But this petition for Matt Damon's removal from Ocean's 8, I think is interesting. He makes the comment, there's a difference between, and I quote, patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation, right? Good one, Matt. You really didn't need a GED to figure that one out. Both of those behaviors need to be confronted and eradicated without question, but they shouldn't be conflated. Well, I want to talk about that when we come back. And the reason why is because I think that we need to clearly understand that this is a pretty simple issue. I think it's a very baseline issue. And I'll give you my perspective on that in just a couple of minutes. And definitely, again, would love to hear yours. We also want to talk a little bit about the Las Vegas shooting. A lot of people, especially I get a lot of hits on Instagram and Facebook, and people write into our website about, so what's happened, Paul, right? So as part of my career, I'm very fortunate to be national security and law enforcement analyst for CBS News, and I covered this entire tragedy on air, both on TV and radio. And part of this thing that I think we need to hear, we'll get to in a minute, is why it's taking so long, why it's going to take even longer, but what we're going to get on the back end. We're also going to touch on some of the testimony that came from McCabe yesterday and what we have coming from that. So without further ado, bear in mind, when we come back from this break, we're going to hit this hard. Definitely want to hear from you, 855-405-2872. Most of all, this is what I need. Today, in celebration of the beautiful, beautiful sacred holiday of Christmas, I'm asking you to give me a call with your best Christmas story, a Christmas miracle. Anything that happened in your life that was really significant. Let's play on the positive today. Let's emphasize the positive because there's so much positive to talk about. I want to hear from you, 855-405-2872, your best Christmas story you got. When we come back from a break, Want to hear from you. Stay with me. This is Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura Ingraham. We'll be right back.
Well, I wish it could be Christmas every day. When the kids start singing and the band begins to play.
Thanks to my wonderful sponsors and your support, I'm glad to say that we can provide this podcast at no cost to you at all. As a loyal listener of my program, please consider testing our sponsors because they're the ones who actually cover the cost to produce this daily show. So if you're a dog lover like I am, how about giving your dog, your best friend, a fresh, healthy, and nutritious diet? When dogs eat well, they live longer and happier lives. I'm here to tell you about NomNomNow.com, which cooks the world's best dog food. It's made fresh in the USA and delivered right to your door every week. Nom Nom Now's customized recipes cook fresh in our kitchen, delivering healthy nutrition you can actually see. Switch to Nom Nom Now and your dog will have more energy, a shinier, softer coat, and a longer, better life. Nom Nom Now really is the best food for your best friend. And right now you can save 50% on your first 2 orders of fresh, healthy dog food when you use my code Laura at NomNomNow.com. That's code Laura and save 50% on your first 2 orders. NomNom now.com. And code word LAURA.
Take back the tinsel, stockings and bows, 'cause all I want for Christmas is you.
Gotta love that song. Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show. This is Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura. And I'm going to get to our first caller in a second. But first, during our break, we had some great calls that came in during our break. And one from my brother Ed in New York, who's out there driving and working hard every day. Love you, bro. And you're right. It is a shame about the Papa John's thing, which I plan on hitting hard. And of course, to my dear and loving Jilly B and Demi that are listening in, keep listening. And I want to hear from you, without a doubt. So coming back to this, I want to go right to what I had asked you before about your best Christmas story, your Christmas miracle. And I have got Beverly from Michigan on the line. Beverly, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing a lot better now that you called. So tell me, Beverly,
Great.
You got a question about, you had a story. Share that with us.
Yeah, my husband was diagnosed with H1N1 and was in the hospital, and they told me he would not come home, that he would not survive. And I had a lot of people praying for him, and he is home for Christmas. He's my Christmas miracle. And so they told me that I needed to take him off life support, and I refused because I said God's in charge.
God bless you, Beverly. What a beautiful, how could you not, I'm getting choked up now. How could you not get choked up at that? You know what that tells me, Beverly? I'm going to just sprinkle this in a little bit. First of all, thank God that your husband is well. And by the grace of God, you are well, he's well, and you're going to celebrate a beautiful Christmas. But anybody listening, how could you not feel the warmth and the beauty of this incredible season by listening to that? Are you going to do anything special this year, Beverly? What do you think?
We're being home for Christmas. Yeah, we're going to stay home and just enjoy being together.
Oh, man. That's, Beverly, I can't thank you enough for calling in. And on behalf of Laura and everybody here, God bless you guys. Have an incredibly beautiful Christmas and enjoy the very miracle that God's given you to celebrate. And have a wonderful, wonderful Christmas, Beverly. Thanks for giving us a call.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you.
A Merry Christmas to you. Thank you. What a great story. I love that. And it's, it's part of the beauty of doing Laura's show. I have to say that real quickly because I'm coming back to this Papa John CEO. I can't let that go. But the beauty of doing this show is not just working with the incredible, and I mean that, the incredible team that Laura's got to put together, which they're all great. But it's the platform. It's what this woman, who I admire immensely, has built. And it's the line of communication that reaches out to people like Beverly and all the other great people that listen to this show that call in. So, you know what? My compliments to Laura. I'm going to come back. First subject I want to talk about before we take our next break and bring in David Mittleman to talk about the opioid crisis, which, by the way, you can hear the stat again. Every day, more than 90 Americans die from overdosing on opioids, whatever you call it. I don't even know what to say, but we'll talk about that. I want to come back to this, and I really want your opinion on this. And the reason why I want your opinion on this is because as Americans, right, we keep hearing about cyber freedom of speech. Well, how about exercising your freedom of speech today and tell me what you think about the tragedy in the wake of how the NFL, this is Paul Viollis speaking, this is not anybody else, this is Paul Viollis' opinion, the tragedy in the way the NFL has handled this. There's a very simple aspect about this. The national anthem was written with pride and love for this great country. It lays out the foundation for the fabric of the cloth of the American flag, both of which are used and have been and will continue to be used in celebration, in respect, in reverence to this country. So to take a knee to all the guys in the NFL, coming from a guy who played football all his life, it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful. And I want to hear what you think about it, because obviously you know how I think about it. No, I'm not letting it go because, I'm not even a Papa John's guy. I mean, I don't eat the pizza, but I would have if you didn't fire him. So if you don't think that has some backlash, trust me, their board of directors, smart move, brilliant move. But most importantly, let's get back to a gentleman that's calling in right now who's got a great Christmas story. I'm talking about John from Kentucky. John, you still with me?
Yes, I am.
Outstanding. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm cancer-free. That's why I called. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer early in December, and I was operated on, and I went home by Christmas. And the odds of surviving pancreatic cancer are not good. And I also am still cancer-free after four years. So if there's anybody out there who has been diagnosed with a cancer that I have hope. Put your hope in Jesus Christ and just hang in there, because miracles do happen, and I'm walking, talking miracles. So I just want to give people hope. That's what I want to give people. Don't give in.
Well, I got to tell you something, John. You're not only giving hope, but you give inspiration. And during that process that you went through, I could only assume that you went through more than your share of chemo. And I don't know if you hit radiation or not.
I had chemotherapy, but I had an operation called a Whipple operation, and it's a major operation.
Right.
And I also want to say to people who have cancer out there, offer up all this suffering to all the people in the world who need prayers. Just offer up your suffering and give it all to God, because Christmas is about Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ loves me. And I got all done with this, and at the very end of it, I said, well, what I took away from this was joy. Because God loves me, my family loves me, and there's so much love in the world that don't think about negative things. Just think about positive things.
John,
that's 4:4.
That's an incredibly beautiful, heartfelt message, and I know it's coming from the heart. And the biggest part you need to remember about this is that God kept you alive for a reason. He does not make mistakes. He kept you alive for a reason, and you, my friend, have a lot of work to do, an awful lot, right? Because to those that much is given, much is expected. And I can tell you this right now, my friend, you just helped more people than you can possibly imagine, thanks to the medium of this radio show and what Laura put together. So God bless you, my friend. Enjoy Christmas. Enjoy the celebration, and understand you got a big mission in life. Thank you for calling in, John. Very much appreciated.
God bless you.
You as well, my friend. You as well. When we come back, we're going to be talking about something that we need to be talking about quite a bit more. I'm talking about the opioid crisis. We're talking about what's going to happen ahead as we come into the new year. We've got David Mittleman coming up, an attorney, to talk about what's going on in Michigan. So do not turn that dial, because we're going to be right back. It's Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura Ingraham. Stay with me. We'll be right back.
Yes, Merry Christmas, baby, and a Happy New Year. Have fun, 'cause Christmas don't come but once a year. Here's to you, woman. Be Christmas.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, sitting in for my good friend Laura Ingraham. And where else can you go this morning to have great news like this and phenomenal Christmas music? So to JC, wow, man, you're killing it with this music. Absolutely fantastic. Remember, you can get us at 855-405-2872. Definitely want to hear what you have to say. You can always write Laura. She's extremely responsive. at Ingraham Angle on Twitter. You can hit me up, Paul Viollis at Instagram and Facebook. Love hearing your thoughts. And remember, when you get a chance, tune into my podcast, The Security Brief, which you can catch at Viollis.com. You can also get it on iTunes. You can get it on Google Play. You can get it at Midroll. Everywhere you can think of, you can get it. The Security Brief podcast. Take a look. Love to hear your thoughts. We're coming back right now with something that I led with earlier, and I've got a gentleman on the line that I'm going to introduce here in a second. But let me keep things in perspective, right? We are in a national epidemic right now with respect to opioid use, misuse, the amount of people that are on antipsychotic drugs, the amount of people that are on depression pills, the amount of people that are on painkillers. And I just want to say this real quickly before I introduce our guest. The face of these people is something that you can't predict. They come from all walks of life, all colors, creeds, from every possible venue you could imagine, from whether they, regardless of their socioeconomic status. This is affecting all of us. Every day, more than 90 Americans die after overdosing on opioids every day. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that the total economic burden of prescription opioid misuse alone in the United States is $78.5 billion a year. It's tragic. Now, what's going on now in Michigan is something to tell of what's going to happen as the year opens up in 2018. And we have David Mittleman with us. He is a brilliant practicing attorney in Michigan. Fascinating part about David's background, has a Bachelor of Science in pharmacy, was a registered pharmacist, goes to law school, true great, American dream story, works part-time at the law firm now, Church Weibel in Michigan, where he is now a shareholder, has been practicing law since 1985, and handles areas of litigation with emphasis on medical, dental, pharmacy, and pharmacist negligent cases. David, on behalf of everybody here at the show, thanks so much for joining today.
Hello, Paul. Thank you. And I'm still full-time. That half-time or part-time in the bio was when I started with Church Weibel back in 1983 as a law clerk while still in school.
And that's the best part about it. I love your background there because that's where I started. Part-time as an intern, and here you are, a shareholder, brilliant career. And it's really kind of speaks to that American dream of you start, you hustle, you work, and this is what you become. So thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Let me just correct one or two things that you said during your intro. This is a national epidemic. It's already been declared a national public health emergency. The number that I learned about in September at a national seminar was $78.5 billion annually. Some people now are saying it could be as high as $500 billion annually, and the number of deaths reaching over 150 per day in the United States.
Unbelievable.
As a result of opioid addiction and overdose deaths.
And that number has changed. My stats came from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and that number came out in June of 2017, which for those of you that study statistics know, that's incredible to get just a short period of time. So if that number has gone up, and I'm sure it has because you wouldn't have said if it didn't, then that even puts us in a deeper position than we are right now. So David, without further ado, I want to ask you a question. Monday night, the Lansing City Council, Lansing meaning Lansing, Michigan, declared the opioid crisis a public nuisance. What does that mean?
Correct. That means that by going after Big Pharma and the national distributors, who couldn't have each done it on their own, they had to work in collusion, it gives us equitable remedies so that we can, under the public nuisance theory of law, we can go after abatement, potential injunction, and set up funds to establish more education and awareness. That's the public nuisance theory. The other theory we're going after Big Pharma and the national distributors is under RICO, because that gives us the opportunity of treble damages and attorney fees based on the actual damages that the municipality has incurred as a result of them.
Let me touch that for a second. Now, you say RICO, so I know what that means. Tell our listeners, what does RICO mean? And that's part one to that question. Part two, how do you apply RICO to this? What is RICO?
Apply RICO because...
What is RICO?
RICO is a statute that enables the people to hold Big Pharma and the national distributors accountable under a theory that they worked in collusion and defrauded the doctors, for instance, and defrauded the public by the distributors not reporting. They had the obligation and responsibility under law by having the license to distribute opioids. They had to report suspicious deliveries, and they failed to. In other words, when 9 million pills goes into a small rural county in West Virginia with 1,200 people, that should automatically stop and investigate. That was never done, not once.
So is your contention that they knew, not what they should have known, but what they knew, and they continued after knowing that they continued down that road for financial gain? Is that your position?
They absolutely knew. Purdue Pharma, Purdue Frederick, in 2003 to 2007, paid $20 million to 5,000 individuals, and then paid a $600 million fine to the federal government. They thought that was pay to play. They were trading millions for billions. This is a
huge
big
statement.
Story.
This is a beast of a story. Now, just to jump in real quickly, all right. So, for the benefit of all our great listeners everywhere, what David's referring to with respect to RICO is the Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organization Act. So that's why I came to you, David. I wanted to make sure our listeners understood what that meant. Also, because typically RICO is not something that you see applied from a legal foundation to a case such as this, which I find is fascinating. My next point here, before we take a break here in a couple of minutes, and David, do you have time to stay with us for a minute after the break?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay. My next question, and hopefully we'll get it done. If we don't, we'll pick it up after the break. And again, everybody, I want to make sure if you have a perspective on the opioid crisis and epidemic in this country, 855-405-2872. Again, Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura Ingraham. David, you compare this to the tobacco suit of the 90s. And from what I understand, generated over $200 billion for the states. How is that?
Well, we are taking a page out of that tobacco litigation, but those entities that held tobacco accountable were the states, and the states were supposed to trickle down the recoveries to the communities, and it didn't happen. So that's why this time we were actually representing individually municipalities, large cities, counties, and so we're basing the damage on the matrix of the loss of the individual municipality.
Now, do you feel this could even eclipse the magnitude from a legal perspective and the results of that from the tobacco cases in the 90s?
Looking at the numbers, I do.
That's incredible. Another question here. The lawsuit alleges that a number of companies engaged in misleading or deceptive marketing tactics, that many failed to report suspicious deliveries of drugs required by law. Explain to us, what does that mean?
That means that Big Pharma sent sales reps to the doctors and misled them by saying that the opioids were not as addictive as they knew they were, and they started marketing to orthopods for low back, neck, chronic pain, and to dentists for dental extraction and root canal pain, when the FDA has only approved opioids to be used in end-of-life palliative cancer pain, where if you get addicted to it, you're going to die shortly anyhow, or short-term acute pain following surgery, 3 to 5 days, no longer. If you're on an opioid for 10 days, there's a 13% chance you'll be on it at the end of that year because you're addicted to it.
Say that again. Repeat that number again, because that's really one of the most telling things here in this conversation. Say that again, please.
The statistics are that if you are on opioids for 10 days, there's a 13% chance you'll be on it at the end of the year that you started taking it, because we know if you're on it for 30 days, you are addicted per se. No question about it. And they knew that.
I want to pick up this. We're going to take a quick break in a minute here, and when we come back, we'll stay with with David Mittleman and ask a couple more questions here. But my last point on this is, when we come back, David, my question to you is, I'm sure as you start preparing this, you're hunkering down right now for what will be a long and exhaustive legal fight.
Potentially.
Well, they're not going to go away quietly in the night.
They're
right?
not going to. Correct. They're not going to go away quietly.
Right. We're talking about too much money here, right?
There are over 100. That's right. There are over 100 municipalities now that have filed in their own respective jurisdictions, but have been centralized in an MDL in federal court in Ohio.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with David Mittleman and discuss this a little bit more. But when we come back, David, one of the first questions I want to hit you with is, what do you think this is going in 2018? I'm Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura Ingraham. Stay with me. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, CEO of Viollis Group International and host of the podcast, The Security Brief, sitting in for my good friend Laura Ingraham. And I've got David Mittleman, attorney in Michigan, and we're going to pick up where we left off talking about the opioid epidemic in the United States. David, my leading question for you is this. I'm going to stumble. I may stumble a little bit, so just stay with me. From what I'm surmising, everything I've read, everything you've written, where we stand on this thing, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to clarify for our listeners. The allegation here, legal allegation, is that these mammoth, multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies knew what they were doing, misled the public, and in knowing what they were doing, understanding the statistics, the death statistics, the addiction statistics, they not only continued to do it, but they marketed it. Am I correct?
You are correct. And I went and looked during your break to get the exact numbers. Purdue Pharma, 2007, paid $634 million in settlements with the U.S. Attorney, Western District, Virginia. 2008, McKesson Corporation, probably the largest national distributor, paid $13.25 million to settle with 6 state attorneys generals, Florida, Maryland, Colorado, Texas, Utah, and California. Failure to report suspicious orders. 2008, Cardinal Health, drug distributor, $34 million settlement with 7 U.S. attorneys. Florida, Texas, Washington, New Jersey, Georgia, California, Colorado. Failure to report suspicious orders. They were the oversight. This is a closed loop. Every opioid drug that is manufactured in the United States, we know when it was manufactured, where it was put, where it was picked up, where it was taken to, and who received it, because it's a Schedule II narcotic. The ARCOS data system monitors it, and the federal government gave 25 licenses only to the national distributors. Only 3 of them really took advantage of it.
Only 3?
Yes, McKesson Corporation, Cardinal Health, and the third one's escaping my memory right now. But 3 of them were responsible for 90% of the opioid deliveries in the United States. Okay.
And you're saying that 3 of them stood up and did the right thing? Is that what you're saying?
No, 3 of them failed to report suspicious orders, have already been fined in 2008.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Right, that's
Correct.
what I wanted to clarify. So from a legal perspective, you're going into this, so our listeners understand, you're going into this from the perspective of it's not what they should have known, it's not what was foreseeable, but and kind of following the platform from 42 U.S. 1983, it's what they knew. It's blatantly what they knew, and it's what they continue to do after what they knew.
That's right. That's why I waffled a little bit when you said, is this going to go quickly or is it going to be long and drawn out? I don't think it's going to be as long and drawn out because it's so clear and we have the documentation tight. I mean, it is
So
I was surprised. I knew about it, but I didn't know as much until I attended that national seminar in Washington, D.C. in September, how big and how bad it really is.
So you think that this, even though you had earlier, you compared it, and I want to make sure we finish this thought before we break. You compared it earlier to the tobacco crisis in the 90s. You think this is more blatant than that?
I do.
Okay. My question here, and here's a question for you. Could this possibly be criminal?
Yes.
Because you're saying there's a causal connection. Please correct me. I'm not putting words in your mouth. There's a causal connection between what these companies knew and over this mega number of deaths per day. So my question is, could this be criminal?
Absolutely. Let's go back to the RICO.
Well, you
did describe it well.
Right, we got to wind this up because we've only got about 20 seconds left.
Understood.
My last question, David, on purpose, thank you for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
Do you feel this is going to take a while, or do you think this is going to hit so hard that we'll dispose of it soon?
It's hard to predict, but they're certainly going to at least put up a fight. So we know that, and we're prepared.
One thing for sure is that everybody in the country is going to be watching what's going on in Michigan. David Mittleman, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. On behalf of everybody, we appreciate your time. We're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we're hitting our top of the hour with more miracle stories, great Christmas stories. Paul Viollis in Flooring. Stay with us.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, sitting in for my good friend Laura Ingraham. Remember, you can hit us up at 855-405-2872. That's 855-40-LAURA. Always get Laura on Twitter at Ingram Angle. You can get me on Instagram or Facebook. And as we come back into the top of the second hour, we've got a great hour ahead now. We're going to talk a little bit right now. We've got Bruce calling in from Michigan. To come to Bruce here in a minute or two. We've got Alan Tonelson, who's a dear friend, one of the leading economists in the country, talking about that's the tax bill, but its effect on the economy. And then one of the greatest patriots I will ever know, Ambassador Dennis Ross, is going to be joining us later in the hour. And we're going to be talking about something I want you to call in on, where we stand with respect to the president's decision on Jerusalem, the UN vote yesterday, a mammoth subject right now, so we're going to be talking about that. I want your opinion on that. Where do you stand on the president's position with respect to moving the embassy to Jerusalem? 855-405-2872. Without further ado, I've got Bruce on the line from Michigan, and Bruce has something to share, reference what we finished with just in the last hour on opiates. Bruce, are you with me?
Yes, I am. Hi. I'd just like to say that I had a car accident in 2005, and I had surgery, and the surgery didn't go so well, and so I work, and I lift a lot for my work, so I was prescribed hydrocodone, which is opiates, and I was able to work, and I was at that time taking about 4 or 5 per day to accomplish my job. Well,
4 or 5 a day?
Since 4 or 5 opiates a day. So, okay. And since I still get that prescription. However, the insurance company just notified me that I'd be cut off totally from all opiates, and I have seen this coming, so I cut back to 2 opiates a day, 2 pills a day, so I can manage it. And if they did cut me off, at least I'd have something to use so I could work still. But that's not going to last that long, and quite honestly, I won't be able to work. My back is the pain goes all the way down to my leg, and without the opiates, I can't work. So I suggest that they're going way beyond the pale of where they should be on this issue.
And you've been on opiates for how many years now, Bruce?
That would be what, 12, 13 years.
12, 13 years. And what? Yes, go ahead, sir.
I function. I'm acute. I do my job extremely well, and yet I can't do my job to lift without some type of pain abatement.
Well, I'm so very sorry to hear this, and I think this really speaks to the totality of the issue of what's going on in the country with respect to this, and because of the fact that it's being used so often to manage pain that I think it's fair to say, and I think Bruce, you would agree, that you become dependent on the fact that you need this to mitigate the pain in order for you to function in life. Am I correct?
Yeah, and then how do I support my family without being able to work?
Right. That's it. This really goes again to the totality of the issue of opioids and the use of them in the United States. Bruce, I can just say that I truly hope and pray that you get what you need so you can continue to do what you do. And I can only say that, God willing, in the future that you get this situation healed, so you won't even need them. I don't know if that's possible or not, but let's just say I hope that certainly happens in your case.
Yeah, here's the scariest part. The scariest part is that they do take me off, and I think they will. I have to have something to work, so now I'm going to be forced to go to the black market to try and get something. So some type of drug, and I don't know what. I've never taken drugs other than this all my life. So, but I'm going to have to. I have to work. So in order to work, I need some pain management. So you see, all of a sudden I'm going to be a criminal, and that sure doesn't make me feel righteous.
No, definitely not.
So,
and I can tell you that the last thing that you'd ever want is to go down that road. And I really think, and listening to what you're saying right now, it's so bothersome when I think of somebody like yourself, good, solid American, hard worker, just wants to go to work, doesn't want to sit home, doesn't want to take social assistance, just wants to go to work, and is in a position right now that wasn't foreseeable. That where you are, and I can only say this, but we're going to move past this. I wanted to say this, Bruce. My prayers are with you that this situation gets resolved, and it gets resolved in a positive way for the best, that will work out the best for you. But I appreciate you calling in, because what you bring to light here really speaks to the bottom line of this epidemic that we're in the place of right now. So my very best wishes for you, and I hope they have a wonderful Christmas, Bruce. And thank you for calling in.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we take our next break and come back with Tonelson, I want to touch back on something that I mentioned in the first hour, because I really think it's important. I'd like your opinion on this as well. Again, 855-405-2872. And I don't want to labor this too hard, but I believe that as we start to close out 17 and move into 2018, one of the big issues that we're going to continue to see in the news is where people stand on this issue as it relates to the sexual harassment, sexual assaults, treatment of people in positions of power, positions of authority, positions where they can use and manipulate and leverage that position over others, specifically men over women. You see the position with respect taken on petitioning against Matt Damon now because of his comments. I don't know Matt Damon. I don't know him for anything. I think he's a pretty decent actor. Wouldn't say he's great, but he's decent. I think he's okay. His statement was ridiculous, and I'm going to say this now, and I would like your opinion before we close the show. This to me is a very simple issue, right? And message to guys: keep your hands to yourself. I mean, this isn't rocket science. Right? Keep your hands to yourself. That's it. Human nature, you see people, a person that's attractive, that's one thing. You don't act on it. I mean, some of the stories that we've been hearing in the news, some of the things that have come out, some of the things that people like, the Lowers of the world, I mean, you just shake your head at that, and come on, stop. My point is this. There's a lot of people, business, whatever, that knew. A lot of people knew this was going on. I mean, come on. The subject, the phrase, the casting couch, has been used for decades. Don't say we didn't know. People knew. And you know what? Kudos to those that are standing up to do the right thing, to come forward. A lot of credit for that. It takes a lot of guts for that. But as with everything else, there's a saying in Greek called "bamestriston," which means everything in moderation. We need to make sure that we watch this situation closely so that it continues to grow in a positive, productive manner and changes negative behavior and doesn't foster and create even more. So I'd love your opinion on that. And last but not least, before we take this break, I want to finish up one thought with respect to the Las Vegas shooting and the FBI officials saying that the motive may take as long as another 6 or 7 months to ascertain. Having worked cases like this before, let's just say when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to just clarify why this is going to take so long. I don't think it's been really covered a whole lot in the news, but we really need to understand because people have a lot of questions. So when we come back, we're going to touch on that. Then we'll have Alan Tonelson that's going to talk about where we stand with respect to the tax bill and what it really means for the economy. So Paul Viollis is sitting in for Laura Ingraham. Stay with me. We'll be right back.
Who's making a list and checking it twice? Gonna find out who's naughty and nice. Santa Claus coming to town, oh yeah. Santa Claus coming.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, host of the Security Brief podcast, sitting in for my good friend Laura Ingraham today. And before we have our next guest, Alan Tonelson, join us, I wanted to finish a thought from our last segment, and that's this. I get a lot of questions on social media, and a lot of people will write in pretty frequently on what's going on with the Las Vegas shooting. Why is it taking so long? So I'll only take 1 minute right now just to answer that. I've been seeing a lot come up on social media just since we began the show. So let me explain this to you. The process itself is a very long process. We as Americans, we live in a culture where we expect immediate things. We want immediate gratification. Something happens, I want an answer. I get it. But the process is the process. Understanding the science and art of behavioral analysis, you have to understand everything that goes into that before you can come down to the mens rea or the intent or the motivation behind what happened. Now, think about this. Over 400 people were interviewed in connection to Paddock by the FBI worldwide. Over 400 people. That takes a lot of time. The data that comes from that is incredible. I mean, in the old days, we used to marker board it. They'd need, probably 2,000 marker boards just to put that information up so it's a visual, what's going on. And then you start circling things that are similar, things that aren't, what's in common, and start to narrow that down a little bit more. I mean, you think about just the hours alone. I mean, FBI investigators, I understand, have spent over 22,000 hours of surveillance and cell phone footage and 250,000 photos to look over, amounting to over 40 terabytes of data. I mean, the amount of data there is incredible. We knew that going in. So to everybody, please understand, the FBI is doing an exemplary job. The behavioral science, behavioral analysis unit is doing a great job. There's just a lot of data. And they need to take their time to make sure they get it right. And the FBI tends to get it right. So that's the process. It takes a while. It's understanding that it's frustrating, but nonetheless, that's the process. My next guest is Alan Tonelson, and Alan is the founder of Reality Check, an independent blog covering economics, national security, their intersection, and other public policy topics. He's also a columnist for IndustryToday.com. The New Republic has called him the most influential economist spreading the national gospel. Mr. Tonelson has testified before Congress and several government commissions and lectured at government, business, labor, and academic audiences around the world. He is the author of The Race to the Bottom and someone that I am proud and fortunate to consider a friend. Alan, thanks for joining today.
Paul, thank you so much for that very generous introduction, and season's greetings, of course.
And to you as well, my friend, and to you as well. I know limited time here, big subject, big picture. As one of our country's leading economists, I got to ask you a question. All right, the tax bill. Everybody's talking about it, but let's talk about the tax bill and as it relates to how you see, as a leading economist, it will affect the United States economy, short term, long term.
I think short term, the consensus for change is right. I think that it's going to give the economy a lift. But there are real questions that surround its long-term implications, and what I'll be watching most carefully has to do with one of the president's main promises concerning this tax bill, which is that it will greatly boost business spending. That's really important because business spending, when companies lay out money for new factories, new equipment, new stores, new software, new computers, whatever, that's the country's best hope for growth that can be sustained, healthy growth, as opposed to the kind of really sickly growth and, in fact, dangerous growth that we saw during the last decade's economic bubble. So if that so-called capital spending rises because tax cuts for American businesses put more money in their pockets, basically, that'll be a great sign for America's economic future. The problem is we've been down this road before, and it never seems to work out that way, at least not for long.
So basically, Alan, what you're saying is that you could foresee there being a short-term benefit, not necessarily a long-term benefit, if in fact history tends to repeat itself and repeats itself here. Is that correct?
That's right. And I'm not predicting hard and fast that history will repeat itself because things change. And in fact, because things change, we have history to start with. That's why we don't have just endlessly repeating cycles. But we do have to take into account the fact that American businesses have received major tax breaks from Presidents Reagan, President George W. Bush, and they just haven't responded that way.
All right, so Alan, I got to ask you a question here. We talk about the growth from industry, and I think it's an exciting time. It's also a time that we need to look at with a certain degree of caution, so we don't over-expect. But as we look at growth and going into industry, the part that sticks out with me, and maybe it makes no difference at all, but since automation keeps reducing the direct hiring of human beings, if we continue to grow that business and the business does well, we're not necessarily hiring that many more people then, so it doesn't have really the direct effect on unemployment, or am I wrong?
That's one of the big questions, in fact, possibly the biggest question that we face not only as an economy but as a society, because we do seem to be seeing the introduction of technologies that can reproduce many more human capabilities than ever before, and not only human physical capabilities, like, for example, steam shovels that can lift more than your standard worker, but artificial intelligence and robotics that can duplicate lots of the mental tasks that go into our jobs. I'd have to say right now that the jury is still out. Because we have had previous periods of major technological change, including technologies that reproduce mental tasks, and we have had continually rising employment. So people do adjust, the economy does adopt, and it may be that this time it's different, but I really think it's too soon to tell.
Too soon to tell. Jury's still out on that, fair to say. Now, I've got a minute left in this interview. God knows I could talk to you forever. Always love talking to you.
Me too.
Honest to God. Yeah. So here's my last question. I got to do it real quick. If history seems to teach that tax cuts and even other macroeconomic stimulus policies haven't been the answer, what is?
We've seen some intriguing evidence so far this year that regulatory rollback and even talk of regulatory rollback can significantly increase what are called businesses' animal spirits, businesses' willingness to invest in that new plant, new equipment. Right. We've actually seen that because the economic data tell us that so far this year, capital spending is up significantly over last year. It's not nearly where it should be, but that's not only awfully intriguing, it's awfully promising if it can continue.
Well, God willing, it will continue. And I got to tell you, with minds like that out there, like Alan's, we have an awful lot to be grateful for in this country. Alan, thanks so much. This is Alan Tonelson joining us, the author of The Race to the Bottom. It's a great book. You got to pick it up. This is Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura Ingraham. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Ambassador Dennis Ross and the situation with Jerusalem. So stay with me. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Ben Domenech, the host of the Federalist Radio Hour. We're a daily show coming to you 5 days a week from Washington, D.C., where we interview our nation's top journalists, politicians, authors, chefs, economists, entertainers, and more. If you're looking for a contrarian discussion on news, politics, or culture, give us a listen and subscribe at podcastone.com, the new Podcast One app, or at Apple Podcasts.
So I'm sending you a little Christmas wrapped up with love.
The United States will remember this day in which it was singled out for attack in the General Assembly for the very act of exercising our right as a sovereign nation. We will remember it when we are called upon to once again make the world's largest contribution to the United Nations. And we will remember it when so many countries come calling on us, as they so often do, to pay even more and to use our influence for their benefit.
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis sitting in for Laura, and that was Ambassador Nikki Haley. And before I introduce our esteemed guest, I want to say this. If you weren't a fan of Ambassador Haley's, you certainly must be a fan now, because good Lord, you know what? She put it so well, and what a great representation of our country. I'm extremely proud to introduce our next guest, an esteemed American, no question, during the Reagan administration. I'm talking about none other than Ambassador Dennis Ross. Ambassador Ross served as Director of Near East and South Asian Affairs on the National Security Council staff and Deputy Director of the Pentagon's Office of Med Assessment. He was awarded the Presidential Medal for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service by President Clinton. Prior to his service, he also served as a Middle East coordinator under President Clinton. Ambassador Ross served as Director of the State Department's Policy Planning Staff in the first Bush administration. Key person in negotiations throughout the Middle East and the peace process. There isn't anybody that can be a greater source of information to all of us about the situation going on right now with respect to Jerusalem and what happened with the UN yesterday, other than Ambassador Dennis Ross. Ambassador Ross, it's a privilege to have you on. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Nice to be with you.
Ambassador, I want to start with this first question. The vote yesterday by the United Nations, 128 in favor, 9 against, with respect to the position the U.S. took on Jerusalem. What are your thoughts on that from the macro level? We'll drill down on it as well.
Well, I'm not surprised. First, it's almost a natural phenomenon that any vote in the UN General Assembly against Israel can be easily mobilized and reflects almost a habit. And it goes back to the Cold War. It goes back to the so-called non-aligned movement. Between the Eastern Bloc and the non-aligned movement, you could produce anything you wanted against Israel. The best example of that being in the UN General Assembly, the vote to label Zionism as racism, which was kind of the embodiment not just of being anti-Israel, denying Israel legitimacy, but in truth being anti-Semitic as well. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of embedded in the UNGA. That was a resolution that was eventually rescinded during the first Bush administration after the Gulf War, and yet what it reflects is a kind of almost tradition of being anti-Israeli within the UNGA, and in a sense, the vote yesterday was a vote against both the United States and Israel. Again, not particularly surprising. The one interesting thing I will say. Normally, you could produce close to 150 votes. The fact that there were 35 abstentions and I think another 12 absences suggests that there was some hesitancy on the part of some countries that otherwise would not have been hesitant, perhaps because of what Nikki Haley said.
I was just going to ask you that question, Ambassador. When I saw 35 abstentions, and this is somebody whose knowledge in the area clearly pales in comparison to yours, to me, that sends a huge red flag of people that just don't want to commit. They didn't want to say anything against or for, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, I think that they had a concern probably about the president's declaration on Jerusalem. Many of those who were voicing their concern said, This is a step that looks like it's prejudging the final status negotiations. The position has consistently been that the final status of Jerusalem should be resolved through negotiations. Now, what's interesting, when President Trump made his declaration, he said he wasn't prejudging the final status, but I think many internationally felt that he was. I think at least in part because there was no acknowledgement that the Palestinians had any claims, which, after all, if you're not prejudging the negotiations, there's a reason, because both sides have needs and claims, and you have to somehow see if they can be addressed in the negotiations. But I think what the abstentions represented was, on the one hand, a feeling that, well, we at least want to register a position that this was a move we feel that maybe would have been best done not at this time. On the other hand, we don't really want to oppose the United States, and probably, I would even say for a small number at least, there was probably a concern that, in the end, what the President's declaration was doing was simply recognizing reality. It wasn't doing anything beyond that, because he wasn't explicitly recognizing, as he said, the boundaries of Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem. He was deliberately not trying to prejudice the final status negotiations, and he was acknowledging what is a reality. So I think what you had is a kind of ambivalence on the part of some that reflected itself in the abstentions. Some, I think, felt that ambivalence. Others just decided they really didn't want to be on record against us.
You know what, Ambassador? I looked specifically at some of the comments that came back from representatives at the UN, and one kind of dropped off the plate for me, and that was the comment that came from Iran, calling the Trump administration thuggish and intimidating. And I look at Iran, and please, Ambassador, correct me if I'm wrong, but Iran doesn't recognize Israel. Number one, they support anti-Israeli militant groups such as Palestinian Hamas, which rules the Gaza Strip, and the Lebanese Hezbollah. Why are we so concerned about what Iran has to say?
Well, I don't think we should be. I mean, especially on an issue like this. First of all, Iran has threatened the existence of another member state of the UN. Right? They say Israel should be wiped off the map.
Right, exactly. Now, why are we listening to people like that?
Well, not only that, why is there a resolution like the one we saw yesterday and not a resolution against Iran on the basis of that statement?
No question.
They are challenging the existence of another member state. They are not just challenging the existence, they're threatening the existence and saying they want to see it wiped out. So the short answer is, on statements like that, they should have no credibility, and if anything, their own language on Iran should subject them to a resolution.
No
their own
question.
language of Israel should subject them to a resolution.
Now, we look at the state of Israel, and we understand that as a nation, historically, and as I'm sure you are, I'm a student of history, Ambassador. So when we look at Israel, we look at history. History tells us that Israel has always recognized Jerusalem as its capital. And we know that there have been other administrations for the last 30 plus years that have talked about this, haven't really done anything about it. And this isn't a, partisan pro-Trump thing. This is just a simple statement of fact. President Trump stood up and did the right thing. He said, I want my embassy in Israel, in Jerusalem, and I recognize it as the capital. And he made that stand. It's all right to make that stand, is it not?
Absolutely, it's all right to make that stand. In many ways, the statement was long overdue. I will say this. If I had been in a position to influence this, I would have done one of two things.
What's that?
After the president issued his first waiver in June to the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I would have liked the administration to have gone quietly to the key Arab leaders who, in fact, we want to be part of the peace effort that the administration is making. We want the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians to basically create a regional dimension to the approach to Israeli-Palestinian peace. I would have gone to them quietly and said, in 6 months, there has to be another waiver, and the president's not going to exercise that waiver again without making a statement about not just our commitment to move the embassy, but our doing so because, in fact, we recognize that Jerusalem, at least some significant part of Jerusalem, is always going to be Israel's capital.
No
and what we want to do prior to the time that we make that statement is, work with you on ways to minimize the difficulties this creates for you. Because we realize the Iranians, Hezbollah, and Hamas will try to use this as a club to beat you over the head with and to somehow imply that you're surrendering Jerusalem. So let's quietly work together, and we'll work out what we will say so it creates the least problem for you. And in fact, maybe a couple of months even before we do it, we'll have some public exchanges in a way that prepares the ground and conditions the environment. That's what I would have liked to have seen. I think what he did was right. I would have preferred the how to be done a little differently.
Well, Ambassador, we're going to take a quick break, and I know you're gracious enough to stay with us. When we come back, what I'd like to do is pick up and talk about the countries that voted, who we should be concerned with, what we can expect to be seeing. We're talking to Ambassador Dennis Ross. Ambassador, stay with us, and everyone stay with us. We'll be right back. Great conversation coming up right after this break.
How'd you like to spend Christmas on Christmas Island?
Welcome back to the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. I'm Paul Viollis, host of the Security Brief podcast, sitting in for my good friend Laura Ingraham, and we have with us Ambassador Dennis Ross, who's been kind enough to stay on for this next segment. Ambassador Ross, I want to pick up where we left off out of respect for your time. My question to you, and as a recap to everybody just listening, we're talking about the UN's vote yesterday at the situation with respect to Jerusalem being the capital of Israel and how the presidents recognized that. Ambassador, my question to you is, who are the countries that voted against pretty much the United States that we really should be concerned about?
I wouldn't say that countries like Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia that voted against us we should be particularly concerned about, because in a sense this was probably a vote that the administration fully anticipated. These are countries that are partners with us when it comes to fighting terror. These are countries that are partners with us when it comes to, I think, resisting what the Iranians, the Shia militias are doing. These are important countries as it relates to our national security interests. And I think there was probably a recognition that they faced a very difficult public context. And so this is probably not a big surprise to the administration. I think the area that should be of more concern to us is that I think there are only two countries in Europe that either I think they didn't vote with us, but they abstained. All the rest of the Europeans voted for the resolution. And again, I can understand having a difference on this. I can understand the issue of not wanting to look like you are somehow presuming on the permanent status negotiations as it relates to Jerusalem. But it would have been, at a minimum, they could have registered that approach if they had simply abstained, the way Canada and Australia did, and the way the Czech Republic did, and so forth. So it would have been, I think that would have been something that would at least signal that we take account of what you did. We have an area of disagreement, but we understand that we really shouldn't be voting against this. And that's what I think concerns me. Well, I'll give you one other interesting example.
Certainly.
Russia, I just want to mention Russia, because Russia, several months ago, announced that it was going to recognize West Jerusalem as Israel's capital and at some point would move its embassy. And yet they went ahead and voted against. First, they voted for the resolution in the Security Council that we had to veto, and they voted for this yesterday. So I find that vote, given their position on recognizing at least West Jerusalem several months ago as Israel's capital, I find it pretty remarkable that they would then, I guess cynically, first vote for the resolution in the Security Council that was the companion of the one that was in the General Assembly, and then vote for the one in the General Assembly yesterday.
I think the other part, too, that I would love to bring up right now, part that concerned me, you look at all four of the European countries on the Security Council voted against Israel and the U.S., France, the United Kingdom, Sweden, Italy. Out of those four, Ambassador, the one that I'm weighing in the hardest on is the United Kingdom. I'm really surprised that they didn't vote in favor of the United States. What's your take on that?
Well, I think there's a long history of the British having a kind of ambivalency on these issues. I mean, you probably don't want to get me started, but it goes back to...
Oh, I'll get you started, Ambassador. I love listening to you speak whenever I get the chance.
Okay. Well, look, so you go... I don't want to belabor too much, but just to give you an example, it is the United Kingdom that issues the Balfour Declaration on November 2nd, 1917. it is the United Kingdom that then issues the white paper in 1939 that revokes the Balfour Declaration, calls for putting an end to all Jewish immigration to Palestine. It's the United Kingdom that works very hard after the war to prevent what amounts to efforts to smuggle in people out of Europe from the displaced camps, because, again, they have this concern about their position in the Middle East and with the Arabs. And I think we've seen, on the one hand, the United Kingdom, under certain prime ministers, have been very strong friends of Israel, and obviously no better friend to the United States. There's no one else who could be a better friend of the United States than under some of the British prime ministers. But the Middle East, maybe with the sole exception of Tony Blair, and maybe I would say Tony Blair, to a lesser extent David Cameron, the tendency to be completely with us when it comes to the Arab-Israeli issue has really not been the rule of thumb with the United Kingdom. And I think here, even though Theresa May, I think, is generally pretty good on this issue, and in fact, to give her credit, she had Prime Minister Netanyahu come to London to celebrate what was the 100th anniversary of the issuance of the Balfour Declaration. That was a very strong, I think, symbolic move demonstrating the fundamental warmth of her commitment to Israel. There were boycotts of that by some in the British Labour Party.
Which is one of the reasons why, Ambassador, I was really surprised when I saw that. Now, we've only got we've got less than a minute left, and I wanted to really maximize the time here with you. Last question, real quick, if you can. Where do you see this going now? What's the next step after this resolution? Where do you see this going?
Well, the resolution is basically pure symbolism. It doesn't mean anything. It has no practical consequence. So I think the real issue is not the aftermath of the resolution. I think the real significance is what's the environment in the Arab world that allows the administration to present the peace plan that Jared Kushner said the administration will present.
That's going to be the big thing. There's no question. Ambassador Dennis Ross, thank you so very much for joining us. This is Paul Viollis. We're going to take a quick break, sitting in for Laura Ingraham. Much thanks to Ambassador Dennis Ross. Have a great day, sir. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to the Laura Ingraham Show podcast. Download new episodes every week at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
Podcast One has new shows on our new app. Check out all the cool features to help you explore our exciting new programming, like America's Lakers podcast with Jay Moore, Sessions with Randy Jackson, So Random with Corinne Olympios, Attack Each Day, The Harbaugh's podcast, Not Just Sports with Susie Schuster and Rich Eisen, and Sound of Success, The Dick Enberg podcast, as well as your old favorites like The Lady Gang, Steve Austin, Shaquille O'Neal, and Adam Carolla. Get the new Podcast One app in the App Store, Google Play, or podcastone.com.